Evening all. How we doing? Quiet is how. Hi, I'm Vic Watson. Sorry about that. Don't know what's going on. Do you want to check out my new t-shirt? Had them made. What do you think? If you'd like one, Simon and I are trying to gauge if anybody does want one. We might just be a pair of losers who like to wear them. Drop us an email to that email address with the heading t-shirt. That's all you need to put in, just so we can work out how many people actually care. If you want to enter our prize draw tonight to win a free book, it's the same email address, but tonight we are having yes please as our subject heading if you'd like to win a free book. I know there's lots of you who sit and don't actually enter the competition, and that's cool if you've got enough books, but really, who has ever got enough books? Not me. Anyway, hashtag VNatB if you want to talk about us tonight. We have an insane lineup tonight, okay? So, Ruth Ware, Laura Shepherd-Robinson, Margaret Murphy, Lawrence Block, Cath Staincliffe, MJ Arlidge, Stephanie Wrobel, Elizabeth Kay, Liz Nugent, Mark Leggatt, and Jenny Blackhurst. Yes, you're getting an extra one this week. There's not just 10, there's 11. Oh my God. If you would like to help us maintain this lovely platform on a Wednesday night, that's the donation link there. There is absolutely no expectation that you do so, but it would be very kind if you could. So, I don't think I've got anything else to tell you, apart from, what about that music, eh? Fun-loving criminals this week. You've got the chat bar. If you've never been in here before, along the bottom of your screen is the chat bar. You can chat to your fellow audience members and also the panelists, but please don't chat while people are reading, just common sense. While I shake the names in the hat, please give me a drum roll. I'll be able to hear. And if you hear anything in the bios that you think is particularly impressive, give us a woo. That would be super. This t-shirt is courtesy of Jesmundo. If you want one, email us and we can try and sort something out. But for now, settle back and enjoy an evening of noir. Let's get this hat shaken. Right. Who's going to be first tonight? My goodness, it's hard to decide, no? Just as well, we'll just have the hat. It is the one and only Lawrence Block. Lawrence Block has been described as a man who needs no introduction, and that's exactly what he's going to get tonight. On his birthday, I won't say how old, on his birthday and on publication day of his latest book, The Supreme Lawrence Block.
Thank you, Vic. I'm reading from Dead Girl Blues, and hope you enjoy it. A man walks into a bar. Isn't that the way it generally starts? Except there's something essentially urban about the word. A neighborhood bar, a dive bar, a downtown bar, a sleek hotel bar, an airport bar to curb pre-flight jitters, a commuter's bar conveniently located right across the street from the train station. This was more what you'd call a roadhouse, maybe a mile outside of the city limits of Bakersfield. That's in California, or at least this one was. There may be other Bakersfields in other states. I suppose you could look it up. Picture a squat building of concrete blocks set on a 1 acre lot. Plenty of room for parking. Plenty of neon, but I couldn't tell you what it said. Country and Western music on the jukebox. Guys with Stetsons, women with big hair, everybody wearing boots. I walked in and my pulse quickened. No hat on my head, no boots on my feet, but I looked like I belonged. Still wearing my work clothes, dark navy pants, a matching shirt with a name embroidered in yellow script on the breast pocket. A bad job of embroidering, so the name was hard to read, but if you gave it some study, you could see that it read Buddy. Not my name, not what anybody ever called me, except the occasional stranger who wanted me to move my car. The shirt had been left behind by the last man who'd had the job at the Sunoco station. I didn't mind. It fit me okay. And if I was going to pump your gas, I'd as soon answer to Buddy as to my own name. I went to the bar and ordered a beer. My usual order was Miller's High Life, but it seems to me I didn't see it on the row of beer taps and ordered something else instead. Lone Star? Maybe. Whatever it was, the bartender brought it, took my money, put my change on the top of the bar. A few years since anybody thought about carding me. I was what, 25, 26? I suppose I took a sip of beer. Then I looked around and I saw her right away. Only person there who stayed with me. I couldn't tell you if that bartender was old or young, fat or skinny. I couldn't even say for sure that it wasn't a barmaid, but I think it was probably a man. I think I'd have remembered otherwise. But maybe not. But the woman, her hair, a medium brown with blonde streaks, was the biggest thing about her. She was a little thing with a slim figure, wore a scoop neck blouse and didn't fill it out all that much. Tight jeans, high-heeled boots that maybe got her clear up to 5'3". Drunk. Buy you another of those? She looked at my face, trying to figure out if she knew me, then squinted at my pocket. Hey, it's Buddy, she said. Who am I and why am I telling you all this? I am a man sitting at a laptop computer and tapping its keys, groping for the right words even as I work to keep my recollection in focus. I am the man in the present, observing and remembering, even as I am the man in the past, starring in my little drama. Who then, and why? If I persist in this effort, and I'm by no means certain that I will, those questions will be answered in the telling. I had no business buying her a drink, and the bartender had no business selling her one. She was already well-oiled. Well-oiled, good term for it. She drank her drink. Was it a glass of wine, a mixed drink? I couldn't tell you any more than I could report on our conversation or say exactly how we got out of there. I'd parked at the farthest corner of the parking lot, and we were suddenly there and in the middle of an open-mouthed kiss. She'd been drinking wine, red wine. I remember now. Her mouth tasted of it. I took hold of her butt, gave it a squeeze. Nice tight little ass. She reached for the front of my pants, held on to what she found there. Then we were in the car, kissing again, and then I keyed the ignition and got out of the lot. There was probably a lover's lane nearby, there always is, but I was too new to the area to know where to look for it. But I took this road and that road, turning whenever the road I came to was narrower and lonelier than the one I was on. And without knowing where the hell I was, I managed to find a place to park. A grassy patch a few yards off the road, unlit except for what came down from the sky. Was the moon full or just a crescent? Was the sky clear enough to see it? You could look that up too. A lot I don't remember. And a lot she wouldn't remember because around the time I started driving, her eyes closed and she let the wine take her. She stirred when I cut the ignition, but didn't wake up. I found a blanket in the trunk and spread it on the ground. It wasn't clean, but it had to be more comfortable than the bare ground. Considerate of me. Always the gentleman. Neither of us had bothered with seatbelts. I opened the door on her side, gripped her under her arms, and drew her out of the car. I'd walked her halfway to the blanket before she came awake, and the look she gave me made it clear that she couldn't remember ever laying eyes on me before. She said, "Who the hell are you?" Buddy, I might have said, but I'm not sure I did. I'd never learned her name, and she'd forgotten mine, and it wasn't my name in the first place. And I didn't care about either of our names. I just wanted to get her down on the blanket and fuck her. Back in the Roadhouse parking lot, I could have shoved her down on the blacktop and done her 6 ways and backwards, and she would have been fine with it. But that girl was gone, her place taken by a mean-mouthed bitch who wasn't having any. What I thought, oh, good. I grabbed her right shoulder with my left hand, and I made a fist of my right hand, and I hit her as hard as I could, hit her in the stomach, hit her maybe 3 inches north of her belly button, high enough up to keep from hurting my hand on her oversized belt buckle. Hit her in the solar plexus, I guess you'd call it. The breath went out of her and she doubled up. I thought she was about to puke, but she didn't, and I hit her again with my closed fist, this time on the temple. Down and out. This is where a person would say, and then everything went black. Or maybe red, like looking at the world through blood. Or, and that's the last thing I remember. Maybe they're telling the truth. Maybe everything goes black for them. Maybe that's really the last thing they remember. Different for me. You could say it's the first thing I remember. Pulling into the Roadhouse lot, ordering the beer, buying her the drink. Those are hazy memories, filled in with my knowledge of what must have happened. But the minute the lights went out for her was the minute they came on for me. Who are you and why am I telling you all this? Now that's a subtly different question, isn't it? A knee-jerk response might be that I'm writing this for myself, to illuminate a life for the man who has lived it all these years. And of course that's true. But not the whole truth, not the sole truth. If I were the only intended audience, why relate and explain that which I already know? Why show off with turns of language? Why find oneself hesitating before uncomfortable revelations, only to steel oneself and write them down? And so I envision you, dear reader, without devoting too much energy to wondering who you might be. And this seems appropriate, in fact, because there's every chance that what I'm writing will go forever unread. At the moment, it's no more than a string of electronic impulses stowed somewhere on the laptop's hard drive when I hit save and stop for the day, summoned up anew when next I find the file again and open it. At the end of any session, or even in the middle, even right now if I make the choice, I have the option of dragging the file into the trash and sending it all off to pixel heaven. Of course, if I understand the technology correctly, Omar's observation about the writing of the moving finger applies as well to anything one composes on a computer. Nor all thy tears wash out a word of it. It's ineradicable. Still, I could remove the hard drive and take a hammer to it. I could chuck the whole laptop in the river. But assuming I don't, and assuming I've finished this and resigned myself to its being read, who will be my reader? I don't really know that. Someone in authority? Someone who knows me, even cares about me? Someone I care about? And again, why am I telling you all this? Perhaps we'll answer that together, you and I. She wasn't unconscious for long. By the time I positioned her on the blanket and got her blouse unbuttoned, her eyes were open and she was looking at me. She was angry and she was terrified in about equal parts. I was lying on top of her and I was rock hard, the blood pounding in my ears. I was trying to get her jeans down over her hips and she kept twisting, trying to get away from me. And this was at once exciting and infuriating. And I wanted to fuck her, and I would, but what I really wanted was to kill her. More than anything else, I wanted to kill her. I got my hands around her throat. Now her eyes went all the way wide. It seems to me they were blue, and they might have been, but I doubt there was enough light to tell. She knew what was coming. She tried to cry out, but she couldn't. She couldn't make a sound. And I lay full length on top of her and felt her little body trying to move beneath me. And my hands tightened and I squeezed her throat with every bit of strength I had, and I watched her face throughout. and I got to see the light go out of her eyes. God, what a feeling. It was like an orgasm of the mind. It was that feeling like when you come, but not in the genitals. I was still hard as granite. I was still desperate to penetrate her and empty myself into her. But in my mind, I already felt something close to pure ecstasy. And now she was mine to use as I wanted. I yanked the boots off her feet. I got her out of her jeans, peeled her panties down and off, got rid of her blouse and bra. Sweet little tits, a flat stomach, and I dug my fingers into her solar plexus where I'd struck her, but she was past feeling anything. I forced my way inside of her and I fucked her, and she couldn't have been hotter or more delicious if she'd been alive. No need to control her now. No need to keep her from crying out. No need to care what she thought of me. All I had to do was use her body to pleasure myself. It's not hard to remember. In fact, I probably remember it too well. I've gone over and over it in my head, letting it play on the screen of my memory like a favorite movie. I do this not because I forget how it ends. I do it because the memory, like the occasion itself, is richly exciting. The past incident has become a present fantasy, still eliciting a sexual response. And like any fantasy, one allows it to change form over time. One tries to improve it. Perhaps she cries out and begs. Perhaps in an effort to save herself, she volunteers to provide oral sex. She's good at it and hesitates to make her stop, but it's just so much better to wring her neck. And so on. But to trim the trimmings and hew to the truth, I fucked her dead body until I reached an orgasm more powerful than any I had ever experienced. I collapsed on top of her, still inside her, and I was unconscious for 2 minutes or 20. And when I awoke, I was still in her and still hard, and yes, God help me, I fucked her again. And then finally, I realized what I'd done. I turned something alive into something dead. I'd taken this life, an innocent life, and whatever experience she'd had in her years hadn't changed her essential innocence. A man walks into a bar, and an hour later, a girl is dead. Now what? The urge for self-preservation took over. There was a shovel in the trunk of my car, and in my earlier fantasies, all unfulfilled, I sometimes used it to dig a grave. But now I rejected it as soon as it came to mind. It would take hours and I didn't have the time. This was a lonely stretch of road, but it wasn't the dark side of the moon, and a couple of cars had swept past me while I lay on her and in her. She deserved a proper Christian burial, and sooner or later she'd get one, but not now and not from me. I stood up and looked around, and on the other side of the road was a wooded stretch. I picked her up and slung her over my shoulder and crossed the road, and no headlights came swooping out of the darkness while I did so, and then I was in the woods, visible only to owls. Did an owl hoot? Once, but only in my imagination, on one of the occasions when I replayed the fantasy, but not when I was there with her weight on my shoulder. A body is said to be heavier after death, though I can't think why this should be so. But dead or alive, she was short and slender and didn't weigh very much. I walked 20 or 30 yards into the woods and set her down gently, placing her on her back with her arms at her sides and her legs together. Sometimes in fantasy, it's fall and I cover her with leaves. But it was the middle of May and the leaves were still on the trees. I could go back for the blanket or the clothes I'd torn off of her, but might the blanket somehow be traced back to me? And couldn't the clothes hold a clue? And did I really want to make an extra trip across the road and back? I left her uncovered. I closed her eyes, as I've seen doctors do in films, and I moved her hands so that one covered the other, at the solar plexus, perhaps by coincidence, perhaps not. I went back to where I'd left the car. The blanket, along with her purse and everything she'd been wearing, went in the trunk, and I wasted a moment or two tucking her clothes underneath the blanket, as if that would keep a policeman from noticing them. Pointless, unless I was trying to keep myself from noticing them, and still pointless, because how could I forget they were there? I swung the car around, flicked the headlights on long enough to give me a good look at the spot where she died, the spot where I'd fucked her and killed her. Killed her and fucked her, more accurately. Here's something you might not know. I didn't know it myself at the time, and I mean no disrespect by raising the possibility that you're as ignorant as I used to be. Here it is. Rape and murder, while frequent companions, don't always take place in that order. Which is to say that I was neither the first nor the last man to kill a girl first and then fuck her afterward. If you didn't know this, blame the media. They rarely report it, because it's a little more graphic and specific than convention would prefer. I have more to tell you about this, but it can wait. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Lawrence. Okay, we have a bit of a, I don't know if you have it in America, called This Is Your Life. Because it's your birthday and it's publication day for you, we have our very own Simon Buick with a few messages for you.
That again.
Yeah.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Now I can.
Okay, sorry about that. So yes, I asked a couple of struggling wannabe writers if they had any thoughts about you and your influence. So they're just starting out, so I wondered if you could give them a chance. The first was Linwood Barclay, who actually appeared on this show last week, who said, I started reading Larry more than 30 years ago, maybe almost 40. His books are seamless, read like cream. The plots are ingenuous, but there's nothing contrived about them. And finally, Lawrence Block is fearless. He pushes the envelope, goes places where other authors, myself included, won't go. I don't know what he means. He's one of the greatest crime writers in the history of the genre. Then some young guy from Texas, Joe R. Lansdale, wrote, Lawrence Block is one of my favorite writers. By observing his career, he taught me about being a professional, and he didn't even know it. What impresses me even more is that he goes his own way and manages to be constantly inventive. His latest book, arriving on his 82nd birthday, is, in my view, maybe his most original and amazing work yet. Happy birthday, Larry. And lastly, for this evening, I got an email from a scrappy young trier called Harlan Coben. He's just starting out, but, you know, one day with the right breaks, maybe he might just get somewhere. And he said, Lawrence Block is a great writer and a better man. He's on my Mount Rushmore of crime writing legends, and the fact that I get to call him my friend is one of the great honors of my life. Happy birthday to Matt and Bernie and Keller, my three personal faves from the LB collection, and of course, Lawrence Block. Love you, my man. So that's just a few happy birthdays, and happy birthday from all of us at Virtual Noir at the Bar as well. Thank you very much for coming along.
Well, thank you, Simon. Thanks very much for that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you again, Lawrence. We do have a question from Trevor Wood for you. He would desperately like to know if you've ever really tried to teach your cat to use the toilet.
No, I never did. I never did, but there's a fascinating thing that one can find on the internet. Charles Mingus, the great jazz bass player, wrote at length about how he'd done this, and a careful instruction for anyone interested in doing so. And I certainly defer to the late Charles Mingus, and as they say, you can look it up.
Great, thank you. We are getting lots of birthday messages through on our chat facility for you. And a lot of people also suggesting that you might have a painting in the attic because they don't believe that it's your 82nd birthday. So happy birthday again from all of us in the bar tonight. And thank you for choosing to spend your birthday with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, well, all right, who's going to follow that? I bet the other 10 are sitting there quaking now. What can I say? It's Cath Staincliffe. Cath Staincliffe is an award-winning novelist, radio playwright and creator of ITV's hit series Blue Murder. Woo! She also writes the Scott and Bailey tie-in books. Cath has been shortlisted for the CWA New Blood Dagger and the Dagger in the Library. She won the short story Dagger in 2012 and the Writers Guild of Great Britain's Best Radio Drama Award in 2019. Wow! Her standalone novels examine the impact of crime on ordinary families, and Cath's latest title is Quiet Acts of Violence. So it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Cath Staincliffe to the bar.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here. I'm going to read a bit from my new book, like you said, Quiet Acts of Violence. It's out next week. I haven't even got my own author copy through yet, so I'm reading it off a printout. So because we can't all meet in real life, for me this is a bit like a book launch for the book, so it's lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. And just to warn you, there's a teeny weeny bit of swearing in it and a racist insult. So if anybody needs to leave the bar for that, do so now. Jade was buzzing, little shocks and fizzes of adrenaline sparking through her blood. Always the way when they were called to a death. The end of everything for somebody. The start of something for Jade. She joined the boss, D.I. Donna Bell, in the line of figures ranged along the cordon. All attention was focused on an industrial-sized bin sited at the near end of the alley which ran between the backs of 2 rows of terraced houses to the railway line across the bottom. In the dark, hastily erected floodlights illuminated the container and the area around. The white radiance was punctuated by flashes of red and blue light from the stationary patrol cars. The bin was about 5 feet by 4, the sort of thing that looked like a big chest on wheels with a rollover top, painted awful red. The name of the firm on the side, Clean Solve, beneath that general waste, a mobile phone number. A gust of wind, warm for October, sent scraps of litter around the bin, scattering in a spiral, plastic coffee lids, cigarette packets, polystyrene food trays. Jade zipped up a leather jacket she could do without it flapping about. The boss held her hand over her hair, which was flying in her eyes. Jade kept hers short these days, saved so much bother. She could smell onions, spices and fat lingering from the takeaways dotted along the road. Wood smoke too. A bonfire maybe, or someone with a log-burning stove. Passing traffic on the main road slowed to gawp at the clutch of police vehicles and the forensics team. A freight train clackety-clacked over the tracks at the end of the street, about level with the upstairs stories of the houses. It was found in the bin, Jade asked the boss. Yes, a baby girl. The boss gave a little shake of her head. In a bin bag, she added. The mother? With an infant, the mother was always top of the most likely to. No sign. Jade stepped back to take in the area. To the left of the scene were a fried chicken shop, a nail bar and 2 curry houses, one of which used to do a decent tikka masala. To the right, a super saver, a lettings agency and a mini market. On the opposite side of the road, more of the same shuffled into a different order. takeaways, nail bar, betting shop, barber, shisha lounge. 2 cars drove past, heading north towards the city at excessive speed, exhausts roaring, not deterred by the police presence. One of the children's homes Jade had lived in was along there, further towards Stockport, one of the first places. Just a fistful of images in her head. A Barbie duvet cover. Barbie, for fuck's sake. A swing hung from a tree in the garden, an orange plastic disc with a rope going through the middle. Jade hurling the swing at the girl who whispered "Packy" each time she passed Jade, and feeling a burst of triumph when the girl's nose dripped blood. A day trip to some forest where the mist hung between tall, spindly trees with black trunks and spiky needles, like some horror movie set. She shook away the thoughts. Who's been? Shared by the Chucky Chicken and the Super Saver, the boss gestured to the 2 businesses immediately to the left and right of the alley. Mr. Sadiq runs the Chucky Chicken. He says there's always people dumping their stuff in the bin. Jade looked up at the corners of the roofs. No CCTV cameras pointed in this direction. There were fewer gawkers than usual, perhaps because it was close to midnight, people tucked up in bed. She surveyed the onlookers, mixed bunch, young and old, white and Asian. One looked mixed race like she was. Eyes wide like this was the best thing she'd seen all year. Any witnesses here? Jade asked the boss. No one so far. We'll be knocking doors tomorrow. We've taken names and addresses anyhow. Hoovering up information because who knew what might be useful in the days to come. Could be someone passing, Jade said, opportunistic, they see the bin. And they already had the child in the bag, the boss said. No filming, one of the uniformed officers shouted, sounding cranky, as if she'd already had to repeat it a few times. Anthea, the boss called over the crime scene manager. When she drew close, the boss said, "Can we do a complete lift and load?" nodding to the bin. Yes, of course. And Donna, I asked someone to recover the child and the bag from the station and transfer them to the mortuary, Anthea said quietly. We're off to the station now, the boss said. Interview the witness. It was a woman who'd found the newborn body in the bin and taken it to the police station. Jade wondered why she'd done that instead of calling them out. Didn't she know that she'd have messed up all sorts of evidence by moving stuff? Maybe it was her kid and she'd hurt it. Or it had been stillborn and she was making up stories. Time to find out.
Thank you so much for that, Cath. Cath, is that the first time you've read from the new book?
It is, yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, and happy publication day for next week as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, I better get on with it because you've got 11 readers today. Ruth Ware. I feel like every time I pull a name from the hat, I go, oh, it's amazing, because it is. Ruth Ware is an international #1 bestseller. Woo! Her thrillers In a Dark, Dark Wood, The Woman in Cabin 10, The Lying Game, The Death of Mrs. Westaway, and The Turn of the Key have appeared on bestseller lists around the world, and she is published in more than 40 languages. Woo! Her new novel, One by One, is out this autumn. So everybody, huge round of applause in the bar tonight, please, for Ruth Ware.
Hi, everybody. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm going to read to you from The Turn of the Key. I'm reading you a section from the middle. I normally read from the beginning, but I thought I'd bring the changes. So I better just tell you what has happened to fill you in so far. It's a novel set in a smart house. Where my main character has gone to act as a nanny for this family in this kind of incredibly luxurious but also slightly nightmarish smart house in the Scottish Highlands. And she's just getting to grips with not just the children, but also the kind of the technology governing the house and this nightmarish app that controls everything. When I woke, it was with a start, to complete darkness and a sense of total disorientation. Where was I? What had woken me? It took a minute for the memories to come back. Heatherbrae House, the Ellencourts, the children. My phone on the bedside table said it was 3:16 a.m. and I groaned and let it fall back to the wood with a clunk. No wonder it was still dark. It was the middle of the night. Stupid brain. But what had woken me? Was it Petra? Had one of the girls cried out in their sleep? I lay for a moment listening and could hear nothing, but I was a floor away and there were 2 closed doors between me and the children. At last, suppressing a sigh, I got up, wrapped my dressing gown around myself and went out onto the landing. The house was quiet, but something felt wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on it. The rain had stopped and I could hear nothing at all, not even the far-off roar of a car or the whisper of wind in the trees. When realization came, it was in the shape of 2 things. The first was the shadow on the wall in front of me, the shadow cast by the wilting peonies on the table downstairs. Someone had turned the hall lights on downstairs, lights that I was sure I had not left on when I went to bed. The second realization came as I began to tiptoe down the stairs, and it made my heart almost stop and then begin beating hard enough to leap out of my chest. It was the sound of footsteps on a wooden floor, slow and deliberate, exactly like the other night. Creak, creak, creak. My chest felt like it was constricted by an iron band. I froze 2 steps down, looking at the light on the landing below, and then up at where the noises seemed to be coming from. Was someone in the house? The light I could have understood. Perhaps Maddie or Ellie had got up to use the loo and left it on. There were dim little night lights plugged into the wall at intervals, but the little girls would probably have switched on the main hallway light anyway. But the footsteps? I thought of their mother's voice, suddenly coming without warning over the sound system in the kitchen. Could that be the answer? The bloody happy home hub? But how? More importantly, why? It didn't make sense. The only people with access to the app were the girls' parents, Sandra and Bill, and they had no possible motivation to scare me like this. Quite the reverse, in fact. They had just gone to enormous trouble and expense to recruit me. Besides, it just didn't sound like it was coming from the speakers. There was no sense of a disembodied voice the way there had been with Sandra's voice in the kitchen. There, I had had no impression of someone standing behind me, talking to me. It had sounded exactly like what it was, someone being broadcast through speakers. This was different. I could hear the footsteps start on one side of the ceiling and move slowly and implacably to the other. Then they paused and reversed. It sounded, well, as if there was someone pacing in the room above my head, but that made no sense either, because there was no room up there. There wasn't so much as a loft hatch. An image suddenly flashed into my head, something I hadn't thought of since the day I arrived. The locked door in my room. Where did it lead to? Was there an attic? It seemed improbable that someone could have entered through my room, but I could hear the footsteps above. Shivering, I tiptoed back into my own room and flicked the light switch on by my bed. It didn't turn on. I swore. I'm not too proud to admit it. I swore long and loud. I had turned that light off by the switch, so why wouldn't it turn back on by the switch? What kind of sense did this stupid lighting system make anyway? Furiously, not caring about the music or the heating or anything else, I mashed my hand against the panel on the wall, bashing randomly at the squares and dials as they illuminated. Lights flickered on and off in closets. The bathroom fan came on. A brief burst of classical music filled the air and then fell silent as I jabbed at the panel, and some unseen vent in the ceiling suddenly began to blow out cold air. But finally, the main overhead light came on. I let my hand fall to my side, breathing heavily but triumphant. Then I set about trying to open the locked door. First, I tried the key to my bedroom door. It didn't fit. Then I tried the key to the wardrobe. It didn't fit either. Finally, I resorted to kneeling down and peering through the keyhole, my heart like a drum in my breast, beating so hard that I thought I might be sick. I could see nothing at all, just the unending blackness. But I could feel something, a cool breeze that made me blink and draw back from the keyhole, my eyes watering. It was not just a cupboard inside that space. Something else was there, an attic perhaps, at the very least a space big enough to have a draft and a source of air. The footsteps had stopped, but I knew that I would not sleep again tonight, and at last I wrapped my duvet around myself and sat, phone in my hand, the overhead light blazing down on me, watching the locked door. I don't know what I was expecting. To see the handle turn, for something, someone to emerge. Whatever it was, it didn't happen. I just sat there as the sky outside my window began to lighten and a thin lemon-yellow streak of dawn crept across the carpet, mixing with the artificial light from above. I felt nauseous with a mixture of fear and tiredness and dread of the day ahead. At last, when I heard a low, fractious wail come from downstairs, I loosened my grip on my phone, flexed my stiff fingers, and saw that the display said 5:57. It was morning. The children were waking up. I had to get through another day. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Ruth. We've got a couple of questions for you.
Oh.
So Alex Hawley has asked, this week locked room mysteries were popular with the Northern Crime Syndicate. What is it, do you think, about locked room mysteries that allow authors to subvert the genre?
I love writing locked room mysteries, and I think it's because when you put limitations on yourself, you're forced to get much more creative. You know, if you've only got a really finite cast of characters, you've kind of only got the ingredients that you start out with at the beginning of the book. And it makes you think really hard about motivation and about how you're going to, you know, you only have the tools that you've given yourself to resolve it. But the other joy about writing locked room mysteries is because you only have a small cast of characters, you're able to get to know all of them really, really well. And you don't have walk-on parts. You know, you can't have people popping in to fulfill a sort of, you know, minor thing in the plot. You just have to use what you've given yourself. So, yeah.
Great. And Gian Cosmos would like to know, should like you to talk about how you choose the setting in your work and how that complements what you're writing.
Well, setting's always really, really important in my books. And in fact, often I start with the setting before everything else. This book, I guess in a way the setting did come first, because when I was trying to think about what I wanted to write, and I kept reading articles about this new phenomenon of digital abuse, which is typically where one partner installs a home hub or a security system or cameras, and they're the tech savvy one, they understand how it works, they have all the passwords, and the other partner just kind of goes along with it because it makes their life easier, which is all very well and good. You know, it makes life more secure, more environmentally friendly, more convenient. But the problem happens occasionally when the relationship breaks down, and then you can sometimes have a situation where the technology becomes a form of control. And there've been, you know, cases where people have had lights blaring on in the middle of the night, or, you know, Metallica playing out of the speakers at 3 a.m. And it's very difficult to prosecute, and it's very difficult for the victims to convince people that what is really going on is a sustained campaign of terror and not just that they butt dialed Spotify in the middle of the night. Yeah. So the idea of creating a smart house where the kind of the ghosts was the technology was right there from the beginning of the book.
Great. And Susan from the Book Trail would like to know if you've ever been somewhere similar to the settings in your books, so a lodge in the Scottish Highlands, a smart house, a dark wood, and so forth.
I've never been on a cruise, which is the Women in Cabin 10. Nearest there's a cross-channel ferry, so not nearly as glamorous. I've never lived in a smart house. In fact, I don't even have an Alexa or anything like that. But I have twice tried to write a book in the Scottish Highlands. My first book, In a Dark, Dark Wood, was supposed to be set in the Scottish Highlands, and I quickly realised that I knew nothing about Scottish policing, which is very different from English policing. So I picked it up and moved it over the border to Northumberland. But this book was my attempt to finally get back there. And it's a region that I love. It's where my mum's side of the family come from, and we spent a lot of time there as kids. And although the town in the book is fictional, people who know the area can probably tell that it's in this sort of little triangle between kind of Grantown-on-Spey and Abbeymoor, basically. And when we went there as kids, we used to drive past these like incredible hunting lodges, and we were always staying in like, you know, sort of little B&Bs or something. And I would look at these houses which looked so incredibly grand, because it was sort of the Victorian playground, you know, for industrialists to go and have your Highland Lodge, and just long to live in these places. And so I guess in a weird kind of way, writing The Turn of the Key enabled me to spend a year in one of those houses, even though I was never able to as a kid.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here this evening.
Oh, thank you.
My pleasure, honestly. Thank you. Okay, so we have one more writer for this part of the evening. Who's it going to be? It is Elizabeth Kay. Let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth Kay. She started her career as an assistant at Penguin Random House. She is now an editor there and is simultaneously pursuing her passion for writing. Her debut novel, 7 Lies, was published earlier this year. Now, to me, the next bit is the really impressive thing. Elizabeth lives in London with her husband and her newborn son. So she's taken time out of looking after a newborn to be in the virtual bar tonight. So she is my hero. So everybody, please give a huge round of applause to Elizabeth Kay.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to read from the very beginning of 7 Lies. So, Chapter 1. And that's how I won her heart, he said, smiling. He leant back in his chair, lifting his hands behind his head, expanding his chest. He was always so smug. He looked at me, and then at the idiot sitting beside me, and then turned back again to me. He was waiting for us to respond. He wanted to see the smile stretch across our faces, to feel our admiration. I hated him. I hated him in an all-encompassing, burning, biblical way. I hated that he repeated this story every time I came to dinner every Friday evening. It didn't matter who I brought with me. It didn't matter which degenerate I was dating at the time. He always told them this story. Because this story, you see, was his ultimate trophy. For a man like Charles, successful, wealthy, charming, a beautiful, bright, sparkling woman like Marnie was the final medal in his collection. And because he was fueled by the respect and admiration of others, and perhaps because he received neither from me, he wrenched them instead from his other guests. What I wanted to say in response, and what I never said, was that Marnie's heart was never his to win. A heart, if we're being honest, which I finally am, can never be won. It can only be given, only received. You cannot persuade, entice, change, still, steal, take a heart, and you certainly cannot win a heart. Cream? Marnie asked. She was standing beside the dining table, holding a white ceramic jug. Her hair was pinned neatly at the top of her neck, loose curls around her cheeks, and her necklace was twisted, the clasp beside the pendant hanging together against her breastbone. I shook my head. No thanks, I said. Not you, she replied, and she smiled. I know not you. I want to tell you something now before we begin. Marnie Gregory is the most impressive, inspiring, astonishing woman I know. She has been my best friend for more than 18 years. Our relationship is legally an adult, able to drink, marry, gamble, ever since we met at secondary school. It was our first day, and we were queuing in a long, thin corridor, a line of 11-year-old girls worming their way towards a table at the other end of the hall. There were groups huddled at intervals like mice in a snake, bulging from the orderly single-file line. I was anxious, aware that I knew no one, psychologically preparing myself for being alone and lonely for the best part of a decade. I stared at those groups and tried to convince myself that I didn't want to be part of one anyway. I stepped forwards too fast, too far, and stood on the heel of the girl in front. She spun around. I panicked. I was sure that I was about to be humiliated, shouted at, belittled in front of my peers. But that fear dissipated the moment I saw her. It sounds ridiculous, I know. But Marnie Gregory is like the sun. Her skin is shockingly fair, a porcelain cream tempered only occasionally, after exercise, for example, or when she is overwhelmingly content, by rosy pink cheeks. Her hair is a deep auburn, twisted into spirals of red and gold, and her eyes are a pale near white blue. Sorry, I said, stepping back and looking down at my shiny new shoes. My name's Marnie, she said. What's yours? That first encounter is symbolic of our entire relationship. Marnie has an openness, a tone that invites warmth and love. She's unassumingly confident, unafraid, and unaware of any presumptions you might bring to the conversation, whereas I am intensely aware. I am afraid of any potential animosity, and I'm always waiting for what I know will come eventually. I am always waiting to be ridiculed. Then I feared judgment for the pimples across my forehead, my mousy hair, my too big uniform. Now, my tone of voice, the way it shakes, my clothing comfortable and rarely flattering, my hair, my trainers, my chewed fingernails. She is light where I am dark. I knew it then, now you'll know it too. Yes, please, said Stanley, I'll have some cream. Stanley was 2 years my junior and a lawyer with a number of degrees. He had white blonde hair that flopped over his eyes and he grinned constantly, often for no discernible reason. Unsurprisingly, Charles seemed to be enjoying his company, which made me dislike Stanley even more. At 10:30, Marnie stood as she always did at 10:30 and said, Right. Right, I repeated. I stood too. She lifted our 4 bowls from the table and stacked them in the curve of her left arm. A small bead of pink juice from a raspberry still sitting in one of the dishes bled into the white of her shirt. I picked up the now empty fruit bowl and the jug of cream and followed her into the kitchen at the back of the flat. She loaded the bowls into the dishwasher, leaving a space between each. They clean better this way, she said. I know, I replied, because she said the same thing every week, because I made the same noise, a tiny grunt, every week, because it seemed such a waste of water to me. Things are going well with Charles, she said. A prickle climbed my spine, pulling me straight, forcing air into my lungs. We had only talked about their relationship once before then, and it had been a conversation fraught with a long, twisted history of a very old friendship. Ever since, we had spoken only in practical terms, their plans for the weekend, the house they might someday buy far beyond the outer limits of London, his mother, riddled with cancer, living in Scotland and dying a very slow, painful, lonely death. We had not, for example, discussed the fact that they had been together for 3 years, and that several months earlier I had found unexpectedly, and I know that I shouldn't have been looking, a diamond engagement ring hidden in the depths of Charles's bedside table. Nor had we discussed the fact that even without that ring, they were careering towards a permanent commitment that would bind them eternally, in a way that even after almost 20 years, she and I had never been bound. We had not discussed the fact that I hated him. Yes, I replied, because I was afraid that a full sentence, perhaps even a 2-syllable word, would send our friendship hurtling into chaos. Don't you think? She said. Don't you think that things are looking good for us? I nodded, and I poured the remaining cream from the jug back into its supermarket container. You think we're right for each other, don't you? She asked. I opened the fridge and hid behind it, slowly, very slowly, returning the cream to the top shelf. Jane? She asked. Yes, I replied. I do. That was the first lie I told Marnie. I wonder now, most days in fact, if I hadn't told that first lie, would I have told the others? I like to tell myself that the first lie was the least significant of them all, but that, ironically, is a lie. If I had been honest that Friday evening, everything might have been. It would have been different. I want you to know this now. I thought I was doing the right thing. Old friendships are like knotted rope, worn in some parts and thick and bulbous in others. I feared that this thread of our love was too thin, too frayed to bear the weight of my truth. Because surely the truth, that I had never hated anyone the way I hated him, would have destroyed our friendship. This, then, is the truth. I don't mean to sound so dramatic, but I think you deserve to know this. I guess I think that you need to know this. This story is as much yours as it is mine. Charles is dead, yes, but that was never my intention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. Alex Hall, you would like to know, well, first of all, you would like to congratulate you on being selected for the Harrogate New Blood panel. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Given your career within the publishing industry, how do you go about spotting new talent yourself?
So one of the things for me, the reason I think that I wrote this book was because I was always looking for a book like it to cross my desk. I know that I'm a really lazy reader. So if something doesn't grab me quickly, I'm likely to kind of just turn off. And I know that in some ways that's a really bad quality, but I know that there are loads of other readers around the world who read in a similar way. So for me, that's the main thing. If I read sort of the first chapter of a manuscript that lands on my desk and I want to keep going, I know I'm onto a good thing. That more than anything is kind of the first box to tick for me. Excellent.
Thank you very much. And thank you for taking time out to join us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Things are madly hectic, so thank you. Okay, folks, right. Okay, if you'd like to enter the draw to win a free book, email us with the subject heading, yes, please. If you'd like one of our t-shirts, email the same email address with t-shirt in the subject heading. I have a couple of little announcements. I know you don't come here to see me, but I've got to tell you these things. Forum Books in Corbridge are actually going to stock are stocking Noir from the Bar. I haven't shown you it today. Here it is. It's our charity anthology. 30 writers have contributed their work free of charge and profits go to the NHS. So if you want to help an independent bookshop and the NHS, you can order Noir from the Bar from Forum Books in Corbridge. The NHS gets as much money if you buy from Forum as if you bought from Amazon. Just saying. We've got little something special for you. So it's got some information for those of you who might be V-Nut-B virgins and some news for our regulars who prop up the bar every week. So I'll see you in a few minutes.